For the architectural flavour, I should probably point out just before we continue that everything that I am showing you is going to be based more around the Revit platform install, not the individual related products. So obviously some of these features aren't going to be available to some of those that are using just a standalone version of Revit, like Revit Architecture and Revit Structure. Revit itself as a whole purely comes as part of the Building Design Suite Premium and Ultimate flavors. So starting with just with Architects, the energy analysis feature has been improved quite significantly. Previously in 2013 and before then, to do an energy simulation, you had to be using a conceptual mass. This didn't really work so well if you'd already developed up an existing model. So you would either have to not use the tool or come back and do a parallel model of a conceptual model that represented your building. Inside of 2014, we've now got the capability to use real Revit elements like walls and doors and windows and floors and roofs and so on as the basis for the form to do the conceptual energy analysis. So you can see up here in the little image up the top right-hand corner that we have a new button now that is to use the building element modes. And you don't even have to put room objects inside the spaces inside the building. Revit will also compensate for that as well. And we can now just simply use the modeled elements to do an energy simulation. Just taking note also that in conjunction with the elements that you're using inside your conceptual energy analysis, we can use other material properties. So there's extra properties on materials that do now get taken into account surrounding the thermal assets that are attached to materials. So I guess the principle here is that we should get a far more resolved energy analysis based off those elements in conjunction with the material properties as well. A brand new feature for the platform is Displaced Elements. This basically allows you to take a model and for a particular view, not the entire model in all views, but just for a particular view, so I guess it would be a view-specific modification, we can actually displace the elements and pull them apart and then put projection lines onto them so that you can see how this particular group of elements inside the building actually get formed together. This is available across the entire platform, so it's not just for architects. It can be used on the structural and the services side as well. I would imagine that on the services side it would be quite useful for being able to specify how you want certain elements to be placed inside the building, or maybe you just like to pull a wall away so that you can see inside the building and then I guess remain in context with the architectural building around the outside. This is one that I will go into more detail at the end of the PowerPoint presentation. The properties palette and the project browser, the system browser, and the reconcile hosting window are now actually dockable on top of each other. So you can see in this image on the right-hand side there that we now have tabs down the bottom there. So that way we don't have to have the windows sitting side by side. Now, it's not to the full extent of what you might have in, say, AutoCAD, where you can actually pin it in place just yet, but at least now we can use more, I should say, less screen real estate with our windows and apply more screen real estate so that we can focus more on the model. Fortunately, Autodesk have also opened this up to the API so that third-party developers can also build their own dockable windows, so we don't have, I guess, too many interface windows sitting in front of the model when you're trying to work. I think everybody probably knows the pain of some of the double-click functionality that we had in 2013, particularly when you were editing The likes of tags, being able to edit those tags quite quickly. By double-clicking, it actually opens it up inside the family editor. Now inside the options, you can see there we have a double-click options customize button, which will allow you to customize how you want your double-clicking to function for you. So you can see there, do you want to edit the family, editing assemblies, groups, activating views, and so on. I guess the idea being here is that it'll reduce the amount of accidental editing of elements unless you actually want to do that as per what you have set inside these options here. There have been a number of enhancements inside the importing and exporting of, I guess, non-Revit related file information. We can see here that there's been some updates applied to layering standards when exporting out into DWG format in particular. And probably a more significant improvement that we have is on the importing of, say, DWG files. Okay, so let's just say you have a file that has 3D solids in it and you're going to, say, bring it into the family editing environment. We can now explode those 3D solids not down into sort of more dumb and basic shapes, but Revit will now try to do its best to retain those elements but as a Revit element instead. So if you were to take, let's just say, one of these shapes here, which might have come from a 3D DWG file, Revit should do a fairly good job of converting that straight into an actual native Revit geometric shape. Now obviously when we talk about more complicated objects, particularly those that might be curved, Revit may not be able to perform those operations because it might be just a little bit too complicated, but certainly for the more basic of 3D solids, it shouldn't have too much of an issue, thereby saving you some time if you were to go and take a dumb 3D model and you want to convert it into a Revit object quite quickly. We can see here that we've got some enhancements to the material user interface. I think everybody knows the pain that we had with particularly the 2013, maybe not performing as well as what people would like it to. Fortunately, Autodesk took on all of those comments and redeveloped the materials user interface, and I think across the board, and particularly to those people that I've talked to so far, they've actually hit the spot with making the materials dialog box work as it should be. And we can see up in the top right-hand corner here that it's gone back to something that's a little bit more traditional, maybe back in, say, 2011, whereby we had tabs, but we still retain a lot of the functionality that was actually inside of 2013, but it's now presented in a better and quicker manner than it, I guess, than it has ever been. There's been a couple of subtle improvements to the ordering of elements. So we can see up here that we can now multiple select elements and bring them to the front and send them to the back. There's been some improvements on the alignment of surfaces that have been divided. So you can see here, maybe inside the conceptual massing environment, where it has a divided top surface, we can now align that to a particular surface on the side there. And on the material tagging side here, back in 2013 when they introduced the capability to be able to lock a 3D view in place, we never had the capability to place a material tag. So now inside of 2014, we can now tag pretty much everything inside a locked 3D view, and I think everybody would agree that the material tag was probably the most important one that was missing from 2013. So just a couple of really small things there, but nonetheless things that people have been requesting and just little things to polish off. Another small thing that users have been requesting for quite a number of years has been to be able to create non-rectangular crop regions. We can now select a crop region And then up on the ribbon up here, you can see we have an edit crop button so that you can go and sketch in something that is non-rectangular. We will then finish the sketch off, and we now have grips that we can go and change as per what you can see here underneath my cursor. Grips so that you can go and stretch that non-rectangular shape in or out, and obviously going back to re-edit the shape if you would like to. I think if I had to put 2014 into one word, I'd probably call it polished. That's not to say that everything that everybody has ever wanted has been put in there, but this release certainly highlights the fact that some of these long-standing limitations that people have been requesting have actually been addressed, such as the non-rectangular crop regions, and also back here with being able to, say, tag a 3D view. Just a small improvement to the way that groups work. We can see here that we can go ahead and generate a project parameter, and when we go and define the project parameter, we can now say, do we want that value to be varied on a per group instance basis? So in the past, when you go and create a project parameter and you assign it to a group, when you copied that group out in your project as numerous instances, you weren't able to get access to that instance parameter on each group to change individually. So now inside the project parameter, simply by changing this to can vary by group instance, we can now go ahead and change those values in every single instance of that group. The idea here is to add some more support for COBie. Obviously, users have been requesting this kind of functionality so that they can use the COBie requirements a lot better. Inside of 2013, we had the capability to put a room calculation point into some families. This has now been extended to pretty much all families that are what we call room aware. The idea being here is that we can now create, I guess, room data sheets a little bit easier and more natively inside of Revit. Schedules have been improved. I would consider them to be fairly significantly. We have the capability to be able to place images in the headers of the schedule. Unfortunately, we still can't place images on a per row basis so that we can do a more traditional graphical schedule that a lot of people seem to request these days. Beyond that, we have some more text properties and table formatting improvements as well. So we now have the control to be able to modify borders and shaders, shading and alignment of headers as well. And the conditional formatting that we've been able to use that was only applied inside the I call it the raw schedule view, now actually has the option to be displayed once that schedule goes onto a sheet, so that you can start highlighting important information that is being displayed through that schedule. I would say this is probably one to get in and have a good look into, as some of the improvements are fairly significant. And can actually have, I guess, quite a profound effect on how people present their schedules, which has always been quite limited in the past. There have been some selection enhancements. Okay, I will show a quick live demonstration of this. Basically, the selection pointer has been improved with some other properties underneath it on the expanded panel, as you can see here in the top image. This will allow us to either select or not to be able to select certain elements, such as things that are underlaid, links, pinned elements. And there's also a new one in there called Select Elements by Face, which will allow us to pick flat objects like floors, for example, a lot easier. We've had split sections for quite a number of releases now. Well, now we finally have split elevations. Another one of those nice little things that Autodesk have finally polished off. This will allow you to do true elevations of buildings where other buildings might actually sit in the way, as you can see in the image on the lower side there. Pretty much works the same way as a section line does when you split it. So as you can see there, another much needed enhancement which has finally made its way in. In the last release, we got a new function to be able to live link views to view templates. The downside to that was that those view templates that were attached to the views weren't able to be overridden while there was a connection in place. We've now got the capability to create what we call a temporary view. So we can see that when we go down to the view control bar down the bottom here, as in this lower image, we've now got this capability to enable temporary view properties, which allow the user to override some of these settings, such as maybe changing it to wireframe, or changing the scale, or changing it to a coarse level of detail, and so on. Fortunately, these changes don't affect users that are working on a work shared file either. So whenever you use these temporary view property overrides, it's just for you, just so that you can get your task done, and it is a temporary change, so you do get a nice little color around the outside indicating that you've got it active, but these things won't be saved, nor will they be printed, just as though you were using, say, a temporary hide. You've also got the capability to apply a different view template to that view, just on a temporary basis again, just in case you need to do a quick change to see something that might be more reflective of another view without having to go to that other view. There's been some performance improvements added in. This is mainly for 3D views and the likes of plans where you need to pan around significantly. The idea behind this is that as you, say, spin a model around, Revit will, on the fly, degrade that model, thereby hopefully turning off elements or certain elements, maybe more complex elements that you don't necessarily need to see as you spin the model. And then when you stop spinning the model, all those elements will then get regenerated again. The idea being is that it adds more performance to you getting around a model and maybe a plan view when you're panning, but still get all that detail back once you stop doing so. There is an option in the options, as you can see here, whether you want to turn it on or leave it off. Obviously, if we've got it on, it'll degrade the model. If you've got that option ticked off, then you'll have basically the same performance you had in previous versions. There have been further improvements to the stair and railing enhancements that were added inside of 2013. I'm not going to go through them all, but you can read them off there. Most of them are fairly small, just little things, once again, just to make that, I guess, the creation and in particular the modification of, say, stairs a little easier. So you can see there we've got things like better temporary and listening dimensions on stairs, and the width improvements and so on. So nothing really too major in there, but just little things on how grips and or how, I guess, how they push and pull the stair object. A fairly significant improvement in this release has definitely been around point clouds. They've integrated a brand new point cloud engine with which they've put across most of their Autodesk products, not just Revit. The idea being is that you should be able to get a more much higher resolution on your point as you see it inside of Revit, as opposed to how it looked in, say, 2013 and prior to that. You can see the difference there. The top image is probably more representative of how 2013 used to display a point cloud, and down the bottom here is something that what 2014 should be able to achieve. It's not just a higher density on the points, but it is also a better performance as well. So when I do a live demonstration, you'll be able to see my machine is a couple of years old, but it can still handle a fairly sizable point cloud file quite rapidly, and to get the level of detail that you need to see to be able to use it. They also did include a brand new program that they call ReCap, which stands for Reality Capture, which enables you to process point cloud files before putting them into the Autodesk products, and in addition to that, being able to view those point clouds without having to use Revit. There's a new feature put onto the dimension tool called Alternate Dimensions. As you can see there, it just allows us to place dimensions in a slightly different way. In the past, where you've got projects that are, I guess, covered across regions where there's imperial and metric, all right, you can see there in the image that we can now place both imperial and metric onto the dimension at the same time, so you don't have to do two sets of views, one for metric and one for imperial, and thereby having to duplicate any work. Something that probably won't be applicable to most users, mainly those that are developers, the API has been enhanced again, as it seems to be done every year. Just a couple of notable API improvements there, particularly around the dockable dialogues. As I mentioned before, programmers can now create windows that they can dock onto the existing palettes that we already have. And also the site API as well has been improved. So where we've got developers such as Eagle Point who produce site works, it should allow them to create better site tools in the future. Okay, so moving on to the MEP users. Air terminals now have the capability to be able to be placed directly onto ducts. When you run the Air Terminal tool, you should have a Air Terminal on Duct button up on the ribbon there, quite simply allowing you to select that duct and placing it on there, even to the extent of being able to place it on a curved duct so that it will actually wrap around that curve that you placed it on. There are some angle constraints put into the properties, so where certain fittings come in certain angles, you can now specify whether you want to use any angle or specific angles that you may define as per inside these settings here. Basically, it's just adding in some extra constraints to stop people from putting in angles maybe that they shouldn't be using. There's a couple of different new ways that we can add caps to open ends on ducts. Okay, so we can see up the top here that we've got buttons to be able to cap maybe all open ends that are on a particular route, or if you'd like to right-click on the end of the duct, you can also cap it off that way as well. So the idea being is that you should be able to add these end caps a lot quicker and easier than what you had, say, in 2013. Somewhat of an improvement in the family editing for MEP users. Lookup tables in the past have been a little bit of a problem in that when you create a lookup table for a fitting, you had to send that lookup table to other people, or you had to maybe configure it for other users and so on. In 2014, we can now basically nest in the lookup table inside the component so that when that component gets shipped to somebody, there isn't a missing file. It's actually embedded inside the family, which is good. And you can see on the right-hand side here that we now have a lookup tables manage button in order to facilitate, I guess, a similar process to what we had in 2013, but now directly inside of the family itself. There's been a couple of improvements just on the duct and pipe calculations. This revolves more around the API in allowing third-party developers to create standards that they can then get users to use. Okay, so I guess around the world there's different calculation standards and so on. So now by opening this up to the API, third-party developers can create specific calculations, and therefore they get loaded into the user's Revit so that we can create a more regional set of standards. Just a small one, and probably one that won't necessarily affect existing users, and that is that there is actually now a plumbing template. We previously didn't have one of these available, so just a small thing, but we now have a template so that we can start with creating a plumbing model. Okay, systems can now be divided into smaller, more manageable systems. So I think most users would be aware that if a system is quite large, it can actually have a performance effect on the user in slowing it down. Now we can actually divide it down into smaller systems and make that performance hopefully improve significantly. For structural engineers, there's a lot of improvements around the analytical model, in particular when it comes to nodes. We can see here up in the top right-hand corner we've got an image. Basically, we can now filter nodes a little bit better in a view. This allows us to pick up, in particular, the connection status of that node in the analytical model, thereby allowing things like maybe color overrides or visibility overrides. So you can see here in the image below, some of these nodes have actually had their color changed to red to highlight their status in some kind of way, which might actually give the engineer a little bit more detail about the, let's just call it the state of that analytical model. The nodes can also be scheduled and tagged. So you can see down here in the bottom left-hand image, nodes actually being tagged with what their current status is. Just a couple of improvements, in particular to the fabric meshing. There's a couple of extra different lap splice positions which can now be added in. In addition, there is also, let's see, a new reinforcement setting called Include Hooks in Rebar Shape Definition as well. So you can see that in the top right-hand image up here. Some improvements have been made to the placement of rebar. So we all know that we've had the cover command for quite some time so that we can set the cover to, say, concrete beams and columns. And when we place that rebar in, it actually respects that cover that was applied to it and shows the rebar accordingly. There's now some extra constraints that can be modified for that cover. So you can see in this image, second from the top here, that we've got this Edit Constraints button here that opens up this dialog box so that you can go and override particular edges on that cover so that you can say, is it to respect what the cover currently shows, or would you like to put a constant offset on that to override a particular edge as well? So not too significant, but once again, just improving that cover capability to make the placement of that rebar just a little bit more rigid. And not to mention, when those sizes of those beams get larger and smaller, these constraints should be respected a lot better than they had been in the past. A brand new tag called multi-rebar has been added, as you can see in the image at the top here, just simply allowing for better tagging of rebar, which is, in particular has been had a spacing placed on it so that you can go and represent that in the documentation a lot quicker and easier. Some improvements have been made on the beams and braces elements. This mainly revolves around the end connections in their justification and their cutback as well. You can see in the image just up the top here that the geometric positioning properties that we had in 2013 have been renamed and improved a little bit, just to add a little bit more consistency and a little bit more flexibility in there than what we previously had. There's also a brand new functionality down here called the location line. which allows, as you drag the ends of those elements, you actually get this nice little green line coming out, which we didn't have before, making the placement of those ends just that little bit easier again. This one's probably my favorite structural feature. There's a brand new tool called Switch Join Order that you can see there. It simply allows you to switch the order on which element, in this case whether it be a concrete beam or the floor, takes precedence over the other. This also works on things like slabs and concrete columns as well. You can imagine slab coming into and running into a corner column. By default, that slab will actually cut a slice out of the column, but if you use this tool here, you can reverse that order so that the column remains the constant geometric shape, where the floor that is connecting into it actually notches out instead. So this is a great one just to switch the order on which elements take precedence when you join geometry together. And finally, for structural engineers, we have here just some extra, I guess, cloud-based and in-application analysis tools. Autodesk have developed what they call the Structural Analysis and Code Checking Toolkit for Revit. It basically provides you with these extra tools that you can see up here. It is an actual add-in that you go ahead and install. I believe from memory it's found on the Exchange Apps website. If you go there, it is a free download. And they've also opened this up a little bit so that I think other manufacturers can also develop for it as well. But if you jump onto the Exchange Apps website, you should be able to go and download this, where it does have the application to be able to put code settings in, obviously to meet things like Australian standards. These can now actually be programmed by third parties and applied directly to the model that you see here. Okay, so that concludes the PowerPoint. What I'll do, I'll take maybe 10 minutes just to go through some live examples here. Firstly, let me open up or switch over to Revit. Just starting with the project browser that's on the left-hand side here. I did say that we have the capability to dock windows together. So you can see down the bottom here that we have a couple of tabs so that we can change across various palettes that we used to have sitting side by side. If I go ahead and grab my Properties tab here and just drag it off, you can see there it still retains the same kind of functionality that we had before. We can still dock it and undock it. But now we can go ahead and place it over the top of that existing one, similar to what we had before. Or alternatively, if I go ahead and drag it down to where the tabs are, you can see there it'll actually go and dock that as a separate tab on that existing palette that we have there already. Okay, so once again, if you've got your palette sitting off to the side, you can still dock it straight over the top of your existing palette as per what we could do in 2013. Or if you drag that down to where the tabs are, you can see there it'll add in an extra tab and dock it accordingly. Up on the select button up here, we have those selection modification tools. We can see here already that I've got a couple of elements like grids that have been pinned into place. I've also got a couple of underlaid elements that have come in from a ground floor underlay that I have set over on the left-hand side here. But if I don't want to make those elements selectable, I can simply uncheck those options over here for the underlay and pinned elements, and you can see now I can no longer select those elements again. Okay, I can't do a window selection through them. I can't select them directly. Let me turn on those options again. Okay. In the past, when we wanted to select floor objects, we always had to go to the edge of the element to go and highlight it. We couldn't select it anywhere in the middle of that floor space. By using this option up here on the modification expanded panel, we can see that we have a select elements by face option that we can tick on. And now when we come over to those elements, we can not only select them on the edge, but when I put my cursor in the middle here, I can now select it as well, like so. Okay, in this project, I also have an exploded axonometric view. Okay, this has been done using the new Displaced Elements feature. Now, I've obviously applied it to an architectural model here, but you shouldn't have any issues with applying it to a structural model or a services model as well. We can see here that the exploded view, or what they call displaced elements, we can also place onto those what they call a path line, so that you can see where those elements have actually been drawn from. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so you can see here I can go ahead and select this particular element, and up on the ribbon up here I have a Displaced Elements button. When I select it, sorry, let me try that again. I'll select some elements which are a bit better. This one here, this will do. Okay, when I select it, I can actually pull those particular elements out, and you can also see up on the ribbon up here that I have a path command that I can use to go and add those little extensions on, just to represent exactly where that particular group of elements came from. Might just come across to the the left-hand side here. If I select an existing group, or what they call a displacement set, we can also edit it, and it kind of throws you into somewhat like a grouping command, where we can also add and remove additional elements. So I can use the add command here just to go ahead and add some elements in that weren't necessarily previously there, like so, or remove them out. Now, just taking note that this is a view-specific feature. You'll notice when I go back to my default 3D view that the building is currently still intact. Okay, so this allows you to do an exploded view and place that view onto a sheet for better representation. You'll also notice, and I might just hang on. Yep, there we go. Just while I'm in this 3D view, which is also currently locked, you can see here that I've placed a material tag on that wall so that I can represent what that material is. The Materials user interface, when we come up to the Manage tab, not only loads a lot quicker, but it is also more functional. So you notice how quickly that took to open up. On a lot of people's machines in 2013, the material browser takes quite some time. You can see here it's gone back to a more traditional style from earlier versions. We have our materials on the left-hand side, which are currently in the project, and on the right-hand side we have our assets. So the concept of having assets is still in Revit, but these assets are now displayed by way of a tab up the top there. We can add in new assets by using the plus button that's just to the right-hand side there. So if I need to go and add a physical or a thermal asset, I can select one of those. It opens up the asset browser, which in past versions was a little bit difficult to use and didn't quite have too much relevance. But now we can go and select a particular asset and add that into our material that we already have in a project. Just taking note here, there's a couple of extra little buttons just to change how this looks a little bit. Up the top here we have a Show Hides library panel. So down the bottom here we still have our list of libraries by where we can go and grab materials and add them into our current project. This button up the top here actually goes and hides and displays those material libraries. And this button just down here on the material library pane goes and hides the list of materials on the left. Sorry, the library of materials on the left-hand side, showing just the materials in that library. Other than that, all functionality is still there. It's just laid out just a little bit better, and for those that have been using Revit for quite some time now, it has gone back to what was a more traditional material browser for Revit. Having a look at point clouds, just let me close this project, opening up this one here. Okay, so as I said in the slides, the point cloud functionality has, I guess, literally been rewritten for all Autodesk products. They have a brand new point cloud technology that they've developed in order to make the visibility and the performance of these point clouds a lot better. This particular point cloud, as we can see here, sorry, not there. Let's just go back to here. This particular file is almost 1 gigabyte in size. If I had loaded this into 2013, not only would I have a very bad representation of it, but the performance of it was quite bad, and even on my older machine here, it would actually drag when trying to orbit around it. It would be very, very sluggish. Inside of 2014, the same file not only has a high fidelity on the point resolution, but the performance of it has been increased significantly. So you can see there, just simply orbiting around it is quite quick. If we just zoom down onto the point cloud file, just give it a moment just to regenerate, you can see there the density of the points is also much more significant than inside of 2013. 2013, if I was to just pan here, that there is something a little bit more representative of how it would look in 2013. As it degrades, such as there, that is how it looks. But in 2014, it's a lot better. And once again, that performance is fairly significant. I've got a 3D view here that I can open up. Okay, so once again, just having a look inside the point cloud, we can see extra details such as, in this case, and I'm not going to put my cursor over the top of it because it'll highlight purple, but we can see the likes of this wooden pattern that's across the ceiling there, and even almost to the extent of reading the Autodesk logo that's on that wall that's just in front of us. The extra tool that Autodesk have bundled in with these applications that use point clouds is what they call Autodesk Recap. Basically, it allows you to start what they call a new project in here. If I go ahead and grab a scan file, and you can add more than one scan file in at a time, this basically allows us to pre-process those point clouds so that they can be then used in Autodesk software. You can see here that we have a couple of different options on how we would like to process those point clouds. So we can, say, aggressively reduce the noise that is actually inside that point cloud, maybe giving a slightly better quality on the output of the point cloud file. You can do some clipping on it, as well as some other decimation of the point clouds in there as well. So we can go ahead and process all those, and we basically end up with something like this here. Okay, this is just that same point cloud file that I had inside of Revit. This basically gives you a viewer so that you can view what the point cloud looks like without having to previously load it into an Autodesk product like Revit. So you can see here, once again, the performance of this point cloud file is fairly good. Once again, it is a 1 gigabyte file, and let's just say I zoom all the way inside like so. All right, pretty much the same kind of view that I had inside of Revit, and you can see that latticing of the timber up in the ceiling there, even to an extent looking up into the center of this vestibule area inside their Autodesk office over in Massachusetts. So while we can't necessarily natively import point clouds into Revit, they do have this recap tool to go and reprocess these point clouds to optimize their performance inside of Revit, Navisworks, and other Autodesk products as well. So that pretty much concludes the webinar. What I'm going to do is open up the questions and the chat panel so that we can answer a few things. I see a couple of people have already started to put a couple of questions into the questions panel on your GoToWebinar panel on the right-hand side there. Let me just start with a few of them. Is Revit working on a cylindrical stair tool? To be honest, I'm not sure. Even if they were, they wouldn't necessarily tell us. I guess the soonest that most people would know about these would be, say, the beta testers every year. Other than that, no, we don't know whether they are working on a cylindrical stair tool. Are all the slides going to be available online? Yes, I can provide the PDF file, PDF of the PowerPoint presentation so that you do have a record of it. Bolted connections, is this outside of the standard Revit structure? Yes, I would say it still is. There is the add-on for Revit structure that you can get to help with generating connections, which you get off the subscription center. But in terms of doing, I guess, structural detailing, you would probably be using other products, maybe like the AutoCAD structural detailing package. Are there any bugs in the new release? So far, so good. We haven't come across any, but it has only been, what, maybe 2 or 3 weeks so far. So not everybody's jumped onto 2014 just yet, but I'm sure maybe in the coming weeks, maybe in the next month, I'm sure little bugs may become apparent, which is why we get service packs released. But at this point in time, fingers crossed, I haven't come across any myself. Does 2014 now show stair nosing in plan? I'm not entirely sure, but I can definitely check that one for you. I know you've asked me that question before in 2013, so I'll get back to you on that one. There's a question about maybe Vista compatibility. I guess that would be a question to check the system requirements on the product page on the Autodesk website. That's something that I haven't checked myself just yet. Given that Windows 8 has come out last year, there's a fair chance they may have dropped Vista off, but we definitely need to check that on the website to make sure. Can we dimension on an axonometric view? That I'm not sure of, but I can definitely do a quick check on this. So let's go to that particular view. I can't see anything that's actually getting inside those views. Can you render elevation views? I think the answer there is no. I haven't tried it inside of 2014. It doesn't look as though that there's a render button down on the view control bar, but you can also always set up a camera that you can orientate to an elevational view, which should give you hopefully the same effect. Where can I get a roof tool for Revit? I assume that you mean maybe something along the lines of a roof trussing tool, is my guess. There are a number that are available as third-party add-ons. I know we provide a couple that we can put you in the direction of. If you're talking about just a general roofing tool, well then you've obviously got the ones that are on the architecture tab here, which will get you hopefully what you need. Has mirroring of groups been fixed? Short answer, I don't know. I haven't personally had too much of an issue with mirroring of groups, although I have seen it a couple of years ago and experienced it a couple of years ago myself, but I haven't tried it in more recent versions, so I'm not too sure there. There's another question there on support for Windows 7 or 8 64-bit OS only. Definitely should be supported for Windows 7. I haven't checked the system specs page on the website to see whether it's Windows 8 compatible yet. Can I export Revit format to open in AutoCAD? That would simply just be a, and if I understand the question properly, going to your export CAD formats and exporting out to a DWG file. No changes in arrowheads, line weights, and geometry yet. Can I export Revit format to open in Inventor? I don't believe so, but I have got wind that you can take an Inventor model and I believe export it out to a Revit family file. I need to confirm that yet, but I believe that that might be the case. Are you able to modify dimensions, place text and dimensions when using a split elevation? Not sure. That'll be something that you would have to try once you've got 2014 installed. Is there a tool to renumber door tags easily in 2014? Not natively at the moment, but there are third-party add-ins that you can get. Can we cast shadows onto adjoining building elevations? I'm not too sure of the question, but if you're in a 3D view, there shouldn't be any problem there. But obviously, if you're looking at something like an elevational view or maybe in plan, that could be a different story. Can you render the displaced elements? Let's see. We've got a render button down there. Let's just put this on low and hit render. Just while that's doing that, I'll move on to the next question. Has the transparency slide, I assume inside the visibility graphic overrides, been amended at all? I believe it's still the same. Can you link an Excel file into Revit 2014? No, I don't believe you can do that yet, although there are third-party add-ins that will allow you to do that kind of process. Looks like we can render a displaced element view, so that's good to answer that one. Can you import a 3D MicroStation file into Revit? Let's see, on the insert and the import CAD here, you can take a MicroStation file and bring it in. Just one sec, my Windows panel has, sorry, my questions panel has just disappeared on me and I'm just trying to find it again. Oh, there we go, it's back. We've got a few more questions there before I wrap up. Where was I up to? When drawing 2D line work on a call-out detail view, can the line work be automatically placed in the original section view? Call out. No, I believe that that's still going to be view-specific and you'll probably have to use the copy-paste feature. Are there still issues with orientating the project north after some modelling and detail work occurred? I guess that would probably depend on what the issues are. And whether you're doing the process correctly or not. That's something that should probably go through to support for further validation. Can you import a PDF? Answer is no. And I think that is it for all the questions. Just one more's come in, and this will be the last one. Do you have access to limit box control from Cyclone? I'm not too sure what Cyclone is, so we might have to follow that up offline. Leica. I'm not too sure on that one. Sorry, Richard. So we might wrap this up. We will ship out a PDF of the presentation so that you've got a copy of it. In the meantime, I thank you for your attendance. It is a fairly decent release, and like I said, I like to sum it up as a polished release, not with everything, but there are certainly a lot of little things there that a lot of people have been asking for quite some time just to round it out. So with that said, we'll close out the presentation and have a good day.